Welcome to Whispering Phantoms, a place for spiritual horror ghost stories. If this is your first time here, hello, I'm John, the owner of this place. It's great to see you again on the Whispering Phantoms YouTube channel with long and fascinating ghost stories. Now, please enjoy today's ghost story. This story is set in a family living in the countryside of California's Central Valley. Nate and Lana have been married for more than 10 years. Their family conditions did not allow it, so after getting married, Nate lived with Lana's family. Lana had 2 older sisters, but after getting married, one of the 2 sisters went to work far away. The other got married and moved back to her husband's house. So only Lana and Sophia lived together in the house. Later, they had 2 children, Paul and Tara. The family of 3 generations lived happily every day. Then one day, something happened to Sophia. Sophia's real name was Helen. The reason people called her Sophia was because her husband had passed away. In the past, people in the North often called their wives by their husband's name, so this was normal. Sophia was a hero who had died many years ago, so Sophia lived alone and raised her 3 daughters until they were adults. Although old lady Sophia is strong in life, in return, her negative path is not like that. And then the incident began on a summer afternoon in the 2010s. Old lady Sophia, holding a straw mat in her hand, hurriedly walked towards Mike's house. At this time, Mike was in the yard and saw old lady Sophia happily greeting him. "Is that you, Sophia? Where are you carrying a straw mat at this noon?" Mrs. Sophia and Mike are the sons of Old Man Nick. Old Man Nick and Old Man Sophia are brothers, so according to their seniority, Mike has to call Old Lady Sophia Aunt. Old Lady Sophia carried a mat on her back. Her hunched back turned to look at Mike, then sighed and said in a hoarse voice, "Is that you, Mike? I was thinking of going to your house to borrow the pond to wash this mat. I haven't had time to wash anything since the harvest season. Seeing that it's sunny today, I'll take it out to wash tonight for little Paul and little Tara to sleep in." These days, the 2 of them have been so miserable. Their skin is so thin and fragile, unlike us adults. Since the beginning of the harvest season, their rashes have been all over their bodies. You can see them. "And where are Nate and his mother? Why are you cooking like this?" Mike was holding a basket of vegetables and shaking them in the yard. When he saw old lady Sophia asking him, he immediately explained, "They're probably at the market, Uncle. I saw them go out to buy something for a while, so they're probably coming back soon. You should go out to the pond to wash it. I'm still stuck in the pot of soup in the house, afraid it will spill out, and if we don't, we'll starve to death." Then Mike ran into the house with his eyebrows furrowed. A moment later, outside the alley, Rose was riding her bike with Rick coming home from somewhere. As soon as she reached the gate, Rose saw old lady Sophia coming out of the yard. Seeing her, Rose happily greeted her. "Is that you, Auntie Sophia? What are you doing here, Uncle?" "Grandma Sophia, Grandma Sophia." Rose tried to call out a few more sentences, but it was strange that Grandma Sophia didn't say anything. Little Rick sitting in the back saw that and innocently turned to ask her, "Mom Rose, what's wrong with Grandma Sophia today, Mom? Did we do something to make her angry?" Mom wasn't sure what happened, so when she got home, she asked Dad what happened to Grandma Sophia that made her come over. Then Rose turned her bike straight home. What Rose didn't notice was that Grandma Sophia was walking very fast today, as if she was gliding on the ground, not walking normally. Her hunched appearance that made it difficult to walk was gone. replaced by a straight back and very agile steps. Old Lady Sophia walked straight home just in time to see Lana about to go out. Old Lady Sophia immediately pulled her back. "Go to the market and buy a big fish to cook sour soup for Mom. Mom is craving sour fish soup today, you know?" Lana was very fond of her mother, so as soon as she heard Old Lady Sophia say she was craving fish soup, she immediately rode her bike to the market. That afternoon, the pot of sour fish soup that Lana had just finished cooking was brought upstairs to cool down, also waiting for Nate to come home from work. Old Lady Sophia was sitting on the chair fanning herself when she saw the pot of sour soup. She seemed to have transformed into a different person, despite the steam still billowing from the soup. She rushed over and pulled the pot of soup in front of her, then put her hand in the pot and took out a piece of fish to put in her mouth to eat. At this moment, she looked like someone who had been starved for a long time. Old Lady Sophia quickly ate one piece after another. In no time, all the fish Lana had cooked was eaten by the old lady. After eating and drinking her fill, Old Lady Sophia turned around and went to bed. Outside, just as Nate came home from work, he saw the pot of fish and fish bones scattered on the floor. He was puzzled and called out to Lana to ask. Inside the house, Old Lady Sophia was lying on the bed, her back turned to the outside, her mouth giggling. "I ate it. I ate the fish soup. The fish soup was delicious. I ate it all." As she spoke, Old Lady Sophia's whole body shook. Outside, Lana and Nate's voices were still echoing. After talking to Nate, Lana went into the room to ask Old Lady Sophia if she had eaten the fish soup. But when she saw that Old Lady Sophia's hands were still covered in fish meat and grease, Lana understood the story. She shook her head, sighed, went outside, told Nate, then rode her bike out to buy something to cook for the two of them. Then everything started that night. When Nate's family gradually fell asleep, someone woke up. Old Lady Sophia was lying on the bed. Suddenly, her eyes rolled back. In her hand, a voice rang out, "Hungry, so hungry, I want to eat. I'm so hungry, I want to eat." Old Lady Sophia mumbled and then slowly walked away. In the quiet space of the night, the sound of the old wooden door creaked. Old Lady Sophia came out from inside with her eyes glancing around as if she was looking for something. She went straight down to the kitchen, the sound of dishes and pots clanging loudly. Nate and Lana, who were sleeping upstairs, woke up when they heard the movement, thinking that there was a thief in the kitchen. Nate signaled Lana to stay in the room while he gently walked down with his stick. When he reached the kitchen door, he looked inside to see who it was and was startled. Grandma Sophia was sitting right in front of the refrigerator. The dim yellow light from the cooler illuminated her face, revealing that Grandma Sophia was holding a piece of raw pork in her hand. Her mouth was holding the piece of pork and chewing noisily. The slurp sound echoed with each chew. Seeing the movement, she immediately turned her face away. Nate was very frightened at this moment. His eyes widened as he looked at Grandma. Behind him, Lana had appeared at some point. Seeing her mother eating raw meat, Lana quickly pushed Nate aside and ran to turn on the light switch. She rushed towards Grandma Sophia, conveniently snatched the piece of meat from her mouth and threw it aside. Lana worriedly asked, "Mom, what's wrong with you?" Grandma Sophia's mouth was still slurp chewing. Blood from the piece of meat was smeared all over her mouth. The old lady smelled fishy, and when her piece of meat was snatched away, Old Lady Sophia went crazy. She jumped up and rushed to the piece of meat, shouting, "Meat! Meat for me! I'm hungry! I'm so hungry. Meat for me." Old Lady Sophia didn't care that Lana was sitting next to her. She turned around and rushed out to grab the piece of meat on the ground. But then the piece of meat was immediately thrown aside by Nate. Standing in front of Old Lady Sophia, Nate sat down and looked at her and said, "Mom, what's wrong with you? Did my family not give you food that you have to eat raw meat like that? If you want to eat something, just tell my family. Why don't you sleep upstairs and come down here to eat raw meat at this time of night, Mom? Okay, listen to me and go inside and sleep. Tomorrow morning my wife can cook food for you." Old Lady Sophia looked at Nate with a sly gaze, then turned to look at Lana and nodded in agreement. Before leaving the kitchen, the old lady did not forget to look at the piece of pork lying on the ground, her eyes filled with longing. Nate had just brought the old lady back to her room, and when he left, he conveniently locked the door from the outside to avoid the old lady from going out to find food later. Looking at the locked door, Nate and his wife returned to their room with peace of mind. But then, neither of them knew that inside the bedroom, Old Lady Sophia had gotten a live mouse from somewhere. Her eyes were cold as she looked at the mouse and laughed. Old Lady Sophia brought the mouse to her mouth and bit it, only to see the mouse make a squeak sound and then fall silent. After Old Lady Sophia's bite, the mouse's whole body jerked a few more times and then fell limp. Old Lady Sophia now bit off the mouse's head and chewed it noisily. Occasionally, the streetlight shone in, and you could see the mouse's fur stuck to the corner of her mouth. After eating the mouse, Old Lady Sophia rubbed her belly, turned her head to look outside, and kept saying, "So delicious, so delicious, fresh meat. I crave fresh meat." As she spoke, she rocked back and forth, her eyes still staring out the door until the rooster crowed at 5 a.m. outside. Only then did Old Lady Sophia lie down on the bed and sleep. The whole next day, she stayed in her room. Lana asked her what she wanted to eat so she could make it. But no matter how much she called, Old Lady Sophia did not wake up. It was not until it was dark that she saw Old Lady Sophia leave the room. A while later, Nate came home from work. Lana prepared dinner and called Old Lady Sophia to eat. Looking at the colorful tray of meat and fish, the old lady's face was very happy. She sat down at the tray without paying attention to anyone. She picked up food and brought it to her mouth and chewed noisily. Only a few minutes later, the full tray of food was completely eaten by her. After eating, she patted her belly and looked at Nate and his wife, saying, "I'm full. I'm going to bed. Remember to cook more rice tomorrow. I won't be able to eat enough." Then, Old Lady Sophia stood up and went into the room, sat on the bed, and looked at Nate, Lana, and their 2 children. Her eyes were scary at this moment, the eyes of someone full of calculation. Her mouth mumbled, "Hungry. So hungry. So hungry." In the middle of the night, when Lana's family had all gone to bed, the door to Old Lady Sophia's room made a cold creaking sound. Old Lady Sophia, with her hunched back, gradually walked out, her nose pointing forward and sniffing as if she smelled something. Under the moonlight, Old Lady Sophia's shadow trudged to the back of the house and stopped in front of the chicken coop. At that time, Nate's family had just finished cleaning the chickens to use for Tet, as an offering to their ancestors and to entertain guests. The remaining portion was planned to be sold to earn some money for Tet. Old Lady Sophia stood in front of the chicken coop like a thief. She looked around, opened the chicken coop door, and went inside. From inside the chicken coop, a quack sound rang out and then stopped. The old lady took the chicken and put it in her mouth and bit it. The chicken blood dripped down onto her red shirt. After eating the chicken, old lady Sophia turned around and went outside. Inside the house, Nate and his wife were still sleeping. Passing by little Paul and little Tara, old lady Sophia sat down and stroked their faces while breathing heavily. The blood from her shirt was still slimy and smelled fishy. Old lady Sophia looked at the two children in front of her and laughed out loud. So fresh, so fragrant. Old lady Sophia leaned her face close to little Paul's neck and sniffed. Just then, Nate's voice suddenly rang out from behind. "Mom, what are you doing out here at night? Let the kids sleep. They have to go to school early tomorrow morning." Hearing Nate's voice, old lady Sophia turned around in surprise, glancing at Nate with her eyes. Old lady Sophia tilted her head and said, I miss my nephew. I go out to play with my nephew. Do I have to ask for your permission? I'm old and can't sleep at night. If you don't let me play with my nephew, I'll go back to bed." After saying that, old lady Sophia stood up and walked towards the door. Old lady Sophia's gait was unsteady in the darkness of the house. Nate looked at her expression and found it difficult to understand. He felt that there was something confusing in this story but couldn't explain it. Returning to her room, old lady Sophia gently closed the door, intentionally leaving a small gap, then looked through the gap and saw that Nate had returned to her room. Only then did she close the door and return to sit by the window. Old lady Sophia looked outside, the corner of her mouth now curled into a terrifying smile. Along with that, laughter and a hoarse voice rang out again. "So hungry. I'm so hungry. I want to eat. I'm so hungry. Fresh meat. I crave fresh meat. I give up." The old lady did not turn around and go outside. A moment later, from the neighbor's house, a dog barked loudly. The dog's bark mixed with a whimper, as if it was facing something very scary right in front of its eyes. The dog was old lady Sophia, walking on all fours. She crawled in front of the dog. Her hand reached into the bucket, took out a handful of rice, and brought it to her mouth to chew greedily. The dog was trembling. Its whole body curled up against the wall and whined. After finishing the rice, old lady Sophia turned to glance at the dog one more time and then left. A few days later, as usual, Nate brought out rice to feed the chickens and found it very strange. He counted it over and over again, but still found that the chickens were missing about 10 chickens. In the kitchen, he saw Lana cooking breakfast. He hurriedly said, Lana, I feel like our chickens are missing something lately. I counted it over and over and I lost more than 10 chickens." Seeing her husband complain about the chickens being lost, Lana looked puzzled, and then she and her husband went out to the chicken coop. Strange. The chicken coop was closed like this, so there was no way snakes or centipedes could get in, and it was also impossible for a thief. If there was a thief, he would have taken everything, not just a few, or maybe a mouse bit the chickens. That's right, it's probably a mouse biting the chickens. Nate, who was standing next to her, heard Lana's words and thought it made sense, but he had never raised chickens like this before. He thought for a while, then looked at Lana and said, "With the chicken coop door closed like this, no mouse could get in and bite the chickens, and no mouse could catch a chicken that weighs 1.5 pounds. I think there's probably a thief. Let's watch tonight." Lana and her husband were so engrossed in talking that they didn't notice that old lady Sophia had been standing behind them, staring at them. Her eyes were full of resentment as she looked at Nate and his wife. Lana suddenly felt like someone was looking at her, so she turned around and saw that old lady Sophia was startled and turned away. Her expression was blank, as if nothing had happened. Seeing old lady Sophia, Lana felt very strange. Recently, she had always paid attention to her grandmother's expression. Simply like a few days ago, old lady Sophia ate a lot. No matter how much she cooked, she would still eat it all. But in the past 2 days, she hadn't seen her eat anything, even though she tried to ask, but she always made excuses that she was tired or didn't want to eat, so she couldn't force her. Nate was still saying something, but when he saw Lana looking behind him, he also turned around in surprise. "What's the matter?" "It's nothing. I just saw Mom go out here and then when I came back she left again. Lately I've seen Mom being strange. Could it be that she has dementia?" Following his wife's gaze, Nate looked into the house and saw the back of Mrs. Sophia disappearing behind the door. For Nate, after the day he saw Mrs. Sophia standing next to him in the middle of the night staring at his 2 children, he felt something was wrong, but he could explain that wrong thing. He put his hand on Lana's shoulder and gently said, "It's probably dementia. Don't worry too much. I asked a few places and they said there's no way to cure this disease. All we can do is take care of her more." When Lana heard her husband, she could only sigh. Nate looked down at his watch and saw that it was time to go to work. He told Lana to go home with him. All day long, old lady Sophia was like a mad person. She walked around the house and then out into the yard, her eyes darting back and forth as if searching for something. Lana and Nate went to work all day. Paul and Tara went to school and didn't come home until evening, so only old lady Sophia was home. That afternoon, old lady Sophia was still in the kitchen, not knowing where she got the rotten fish from, and she put it in her mouth to chew. Suddenly, the sound of a puppy barking loudly from the neighbor's house made her startled and look over through the kitchen window. Old lady Sophia saw a dog tied up in the yard in front of her neighbor James's house, probably his wife Lucy, who had just bought it to guard the house. Looking at that puppy, old lady Sophia's drool dripped from her mouth and the corner of her mouth smiled. Turning back into the house, old lady Sophia put her hat on her head and then lurked over to old lady James's house. A moment later, the dog let out a loud whine. The shadow of old lady Sophia quietly walked out from old James's yard, and a dark red blood stain gradually appeared under her shirt. The old lady flew home, went straight into the room, and took out something hidden in her shirt. In the room, a strong fishy smell appeared, along with the sound of chewing and the familiar voice of old lady Sophia. "Delicious, very delicious. It must be like that. Delicious." Suddenly, the old lady spat something out of her mouth, which were the puppy's 2 eyes. Looking at the 2 white eyes with blood vessels all around, the old lady put it back into her mouth. From inside her mouth, a pop sound rang out. So delicious, fatty, delicious, delicious. Just like that, old lady Sophia ate one piece after another. In the evening, when Nate came home from work, Lana had prepared dinner. As usual, old lady Sophia just locked herself in her room, no matter how Lana called her. She wouldn't come out. She was very worried about the old lady, but seeing that her health was still normal, she didn't dare force her. Placing the bowl of rice at the end of the bed where old lady Sophia was lying, she softly said, "Mom, I'll leave your food here, just in case you're hungry later. You can eat it. Take it out. I won't eat it. I have to eat fresh food. Fresh food is delicious. Do you understand?" Old Lady Sophia raised her hand and threw the rice bowl to the ground. Lana was startled when she saw this scene and stepped back. From deep within Old Lady Sophia's eyes, Lana seemed to feel an invisible force suppressing her. She looked down at the broken rice bowl on the floor. "Mom, if you didn't eat it, you told me to bring it out. Why did you have to do that? What kind of fresh food do you want to eat? Do you want to eat raw meat? How could you eat those things? I told you, you can't eat those things. Do you understand, Mom?" Hearing Lana say that, Old Lady Sophia immediately went crazy. She jumped up and crawled on the bed like a beast, bared her teeth, and pointed at Lana's face and shouted, "I don't know. I just need fresh meat. Do you understand? You have to give me fresh meat. Fresh meat is delicious. Do you understand?" The old lady's hoarse scolding made Nate outside rush in. As soon as she saw Nate, Old Lady Sophia seemed to transform into a different person. Old Lady Sophia was now lying with her face turned to the wall, her whole body trembling as she moaned, "Mommy is so hungry, Nate. Mommy craves meat. Mommy craves meat so much, Nate." Nate patted his wife's shoulder and signaled Lana to go outside. He walked to the bed and sat down next to the old lady and asked, "What do you want to eat so I can tell my wife to make it for you? Don't break things like that anymore. My wife is your daughter after all and works hard all day. Don't do that, and she will be sad. So what do you want to eat now so I can tell my wife to make it for you?" At this moment, the corner of Old Lady Sophia's mouth curled up into a smile. Her sharp eyes glanced behind her and she began to speak. "I'm very hungry. I'm very hungry. I crave fresh meat. Fresh meat is more nutritious." Nate shuddered a little when he heard her say this. He remembered the day when Grandma Sophia ate the raw meat in the kitchen, but he couldn't let Grandma Sophia look hungry like this forever. While he was still thinking about what to do, Grandma Sophia's groaning voice rang out again. "Nate, I'm hungry. Feed me. Nate, I'm starving. Nate." Grandma Sophia's groaning made it even harder for Nate to think. After thinking for a while, he sighed. "Then tell Lana to cook rare beef for me to eat. I can't eat raw meat. If I eat it, I'll get sick and it'll be miserable." Grandma Sophia lay on the bed, her whole body still trembling, looking very sick. The corners of her mouth twitched slightly as she said, "Okay, then let's eat the beef for now, but just lightly. Don't let it cook too long or I won't eat it. If I don't eat it, I'll starve to death and then I'll turn into a hungry ghost." Nate agreed with the old lady before leaving the room. He didn't forget to clean up the broken dishes that Sophia had just made. Following Nate's back, the old lady turned her head out of bed to look at him. Her face was now twisted in a terrifying way. Her giggles and groans rang out again. "Mom, your meat is done. Eat it early and go to bed." Nate brought the bowl of beef and placed it on the bed. Old Lady Sophia looked at the bowl of meat with steam rising from the blood still seeping out, and was so happy that she felt like she was starving. She stuck her hand in the bowl and ate. Nate was startled for a moment and looked at her with a suspicious look. These past few days, he had been asking acquaintances about the symptoms of dementia, but the symptoms that everyone said were not like those of Old Lady Sophia. There were times when he wondered if his mother really had that disease. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't notice when Old Lady Sophia had finished the big bowl of beef. Putting the empty bowl down in front of him, Old Lady Sophia coughed and said, "I'm done eating. Take the bowl out. The meat is a bit cooked later, so try to boil it quickly. I'm tired. I'm going to sleep." After saying that, the old lady yawned a few times and lay down on the bed, snoring. Nate just shook his head and sighed as he walked outside. At midnight, the sound of a rooster crowing outside startled her awake. She glanced around the room and then started to go out. As usual, old lady Sophia went straight to the chicken coop. What she didn't know was that not far away, right at the water tank, there were two people waiting, Nate and Lana. When they saw that the person walking out of the chicken coop was old lady Sophia, the other two were startled and turned to look at each other. Lana jumped up and tried to run to the old lady, but was pulled back by Nate. At that moment, the old lady suddenly turned her head to look over. Her face at this moment startled both Nate and Lana. Her twisted face and extremely strange expression looked like a demon's face, along with her sharp, scary eyes, giving off a cold look that made Nate swallow his saliva. The old lady looked around for a while and saw nothing unusual before opening the chicken coop door and crawling inside. The sound of chickens squawking echoed inside the chicken coop. Lana could no longer keep her composure and turned to her husband and asked, "What should we do now? Why is Mom out in the chicken coop in the middle of the night?" "I don't know either, but the number of chickens lost is probably related to Mom. Now let's go to the chicken coop and see what Mom is doing." Nate and Lana walked gently towards the chicken coop door. Before they reached the coop, they could already smell the fishy smell coming from inside. Nate signaled for Lana to stop, and then he walked towards the chicken coop door alone. Putting his hand on the wooden door, Nate pulled the door open. The flashlight in his hand shone straight inside. Old lady Sophia was sitting right in the middle of the coop, holding a mangled chicken in her hand. Seeing the light shining in, she turned around to look. Blood was dripping from her mouth, and her eyes had turned white. Old lady Sophia looked towards Nate and then turned to put the chicken in her mouth. Nate turned to look at Lana, dumbfounded, unable to hide his shock. Seeing that, Lana hurriedly ran over to look at old lady Sophia. Her expression was not much different from Nate's. She rushed towards old lady Sophia and cried, "Mom! Mom! What are you doing, Mom?" Seeing someone rushing towards her, old lady Sophia suddenly retreated. She huddled in the corner of the chicken coop, her two hands tightly hugging the chicken, looking at Lana and threatening, Get away. You can't come near. This is my food. Get out. This is my food. Do you understand? It's my food." After a while, she brought the chicken to her mouth and ate it greedily. At the bite mark, chicken blood flowed out of the chicken, giving off a fishy smell. Nate had now regained his composure. He snatched the chicken out of old lady Sophia's hand. Seeing the food gone, old lady Sophia went crazy. She rushed towards Nate and tore it apart. Give me back the chicken. I told you to give me back my food. I'm so hungry, do you know that?" Nate said nothing and turned to give the flashlight to Lana. Then he hugged her tightly and took her home. He pulled Sophia into the room and locked her in. Being locked up, Sophia became even more crazy. The sound of broken things began to ring out along with the door being banged on by her. "I'm out. You guys quickly let me out. Give me back my food. I'm so hungry. Give me back my food." As she spoke, Sophia scratched at the door. Lana turned to look at her husband and cried. Her two children were also awakened by the noise. They hugged her and cried loudly. After struggling with the old woman for a while, Nate turned to look at his wife and said with intermittent breathing, "Mom must be very sick. If anything happens, let's take her to the doctor to see what's going on." For now, we'll just lock her in the room and we'll figure it out tomorrow. Standing out here right now isn't the way." Then Nate took his wife and 2 children back to the room, and after a while of smashing things without seeing any movement, old lady Sophia turned around and went back to bed. As she walked, she muttered, "You guys, you dare to steal my food? You guys will die. I will kill you. My food. I'm so hungry. I want to eat." Old lady Sophia's moans continued to echo in the room. The next morning, because it was the weekend, Nate was home from work. After the couple finished eating, Lana intended to bring her grandmother a bowl of noodles for breakfast, but Nate stopped her. Nate pulled his wife outside the house and started talking. "Mom won't eat it. I'll just smash it anyway. I'll take the boiled beef like yesterday and bring it to Mom." Listening to her husband, Lana made a bowl of rare beef and brought it to the old lady's room. She was lying on the bed, smelling the meat. She jumped up, snatched the bowl of meat from Lana's hand, and ate it like she was starving. Right at that moment, Nick's voice rang out from outside. "Are Nate and Sophia home?" Lana was inside the house and heard Nick's voice. When she saw Nick standing in the yard, she immediately greeted him. "Is that you, Uncle Nick? What are you doing at my house looking for Nate and my mother so early in the morning?" "No, nothing. I came to tell you and your family that there is a memorial service for my grandfather at home this afternoon, so I'll let you know so you can come over for lunch and call the kids too. Remember to come over, okay?" Mr. Nick had just finished speaking when Mrs. Sophia came out of the house with a cane. Her demeanor was now like that of a normal person. She went out to the porch and looked at Mr. Nick warmly and said, "So have you invited everyone yet? How are the preparations for the feast? If not, let Lana and Nate come over and help." "Don't worry, I've arranged everything. For now, I'll go over to Mr. Hung and Mr. Ty's house and call them out for a group drink." Mr. Nick turned and left. Nate and Lana looked at each other and frowned in confusion. Just a moment ago, the old lady was still acting all up to the couple, but now she looked completely normal. They didn't understand why, but seeing their mother back to normal made them feel a little happy. That afternoon, while everyone was still busy preparing the offerings on the altar in time for the offering, old lady Sophia came from outside, ignoring everyone's greetings. She quickly walked into the family church, climbed up to the altar, and grabbed the food with her hands. Nick's wife, Ella, was standing there preparing the offerings. When she saw old lady Sophia rushing forward and jumping up to grab the food, she was very frightened. She quickly ran outside and shouted, "Nate! Lana! Mike! It's all gone! Hurry up and get into the church! What happened to old lady Sophia?" "Where are you, Grandpa?" Hearing the shouts, the people in the house who were in the kitchen ran out. Seeing everyone, Mrs. Ella immediately pointed into the church and stammered, "Hurry up and go into the church. What happened to your Sophia?" So everyone went into the church and saw the scene of old lady Sophia sitting in the middle of the altar, picking up handfuls of food and chewing it greedily. Nate and Lana were both present at this time. Seeing their mother's illness returning, the two of them panicked and were about to rush towards Mrs. Sophia. But then Mr. Nick's voice rang out from behind. "Mike, Peter, quickly bring Mrs. Sophia down here. Your mother is possessed by a spirit. Quickly bring her down here." Hearing that, Mike and Peter immediately ran towards Mrs. Sophia. Seeing someone approaching, she immediately grabbed some dishes and threw them straight at them, making a loud crash. Being thrown, Mike and Peter stepped back slightly. Behind them, Mr. Nick's voice shouted loudly. "What are you still standing there for? Quickly bring Mrs. Sophia down here." Then Mike and Peter rushed over, grabbed Mrs. Sophia's hands, and restrained her. Old Lady Sophia struggled all over, her eyes bulging as she looked at everyone and shouted in a harsh voice, Be quiet so I can eat. Let me go. I'm hungry. Let me go. Let me go." No matter how much the old lady struggled, Mike and Peter still pulled her down. Mr. Nick asked someone to tie Old Lady Sophia up with a rope. Then he went to light Rose on the family altar and prayed something. After praying, Mr. Nick turned back to where Old Lady Sophia was sitting and said, "Who is the spirit? Why did it possess this woman?" Old Lady Sophia's eyes were now white as she looked at Mr. Nick and laughed out loud. "Who am I? I don't know. I won't tell you. What can you do to me?" Old Lady Nick didn't say anything. He pulled Old Lady Sophia to the family altar. "My ancestors are here. Do you think this is a place for you to act recklessly? Why don't you quickly tell me your name?" Old Lady Sophia had no fear on her face. She turned to look at Mr. Nick and shook her head defiantly. "What are you guys that I should be afraid of? I need to eat. What I need is food. You guys can't do anything to me." Mr. Nick saw that speaking gently to this spirit was not working, so he once again went to the shrine and clasped his hands in prayer. Then he took the sword from the platform and brought it to where Mrs. Sophia was sitting and shouted, "I'll ask again. What's the spirit's name? Why did it possess this woman? If you don't tell me, don't blame me." The sword that old man Nick held out was the sword left by an old man in the family who was a fierce general in ancient times. That sword had killed countless enemies. It was a treasure worshipped by the family. As soon as the knife was placed against her neck, Old Lady Sophia's whole body suddenly trembled. Her voice was somewhat weak. She stammered, My name is Taylor, originally a person who died of starvation in the Dust Bowl of 1930. A few days ago, I found this woman compatible with my spirit, so I possessed her. At first, I only possessed her to ask for some rice and fish soup, but her 2 children took such good care of her that I stayed in her body. I didn't mean to harm anyone, I hope. I hope you will forgive me." Hearing Old Lady Sophia speak up to here, Mr. Nick understood the crux of the problem. He continued to ask, "Where is the spirit now? Whatever the spirit wants, just say it and we will fulfill it, then immediately leave." He asked the old lady, I'm behind that person's house." As she spoke, Old Lady Sophia pointed at Mike and continued, "I just ask for my fill. I will be able to go to everything here right away. You can eat whatever you want. After you're done eating, return the soul to this person. If you still want to do anything, don't blame me." "Yes, yes." Then Old Lady Sophia rushed into eating ravenously. After finishing eating, Old Lady Sophia wiped her mouth and stood up. She looked at everyone and said in a harsh voice, "I'm done eating. Now I'm going home." Then Old Lady Sophia turned and left. She walked so fast that it was as if she was gliding on the ground. Mike followed Nick's instructions and took a bowl of white salt and a bowl of sticky rice, mixing them together. He held the bowl of rice and salt and walked right behind Mrs. Sophia, scattering rice and salt wherever he went. Mrs. Sophia went straight to the back of Mike's pond and jumped headfirst into the field. Everyone saw that and quickly went to help Mrs. Sophia up. Mike also went to see a mound of earth next to where Mrs. Sophia was lying, so he put down the bowl of salt and rice and took out Rose and stuck it into the mound of earth. Okay, the spirit has escaped from the old lady. Everyone hurry up and take her home. Only then did Mr. Nick catch up and take Mrs. Sophia back. That afternoon at Nick's house, the story of old lady Sophia being possessed by a hungry ghost became the talk of everyone. Nate and Lana were scolded by Nick for not telling anyone about Sophia's strange behavior. This was also a lesson for everyone in the house. As for old lady Sophia, she only woke up in the evening. When Nate and Lana told her that she had been possessed by a hungry ghost for the past few days, she was scared to death. Old lady Sophia had only heard stories of people being possessed by hungry ghosts to find food, but she had never actually seen one, and she never dared to think that a ghost would possess her and control her like a puppet. Since that day, old lady Sophia did not dare to go near Mike's house anymore. Even if she had to go to Mike's house, she would only dare to go to his gate and then turn around and go home. The whole story ends here today. Thank you all for listening and watching. If you have any feelings or thoughts about this story, please leave your comments below the video. Now, goodbye and see you again in the next broadcast on the Whispering Phantoms channel. I wish you all a very good night's sleep.